Hey kiddos, we have two more lessons this semester. Each of those are going to be dealing with economics. This one happens to look at what an economy is. After you do this, watch this video, then there's going to be a comprehension check. It's going to be around 20 questions. And get online and take that. So let's go ahead and get started with this lesson. What is an economy? An economy is simply, in the textbook definition, is the wealth and resources of a country or region, especially in terms of production and consumption of goods and services. When we study economics, we're really looking at how individuals and societies satisfy their unlimited wants with limited resources. So it's important to know that everything on our earth, no matter what it is, there is some limit to what's going on. So economics is looking at how people balance the need with wanting everything, wanting all of what they want, with this limited amount of resources that we have on the planet. So that's what we're going to look at today as we move forward. This is something that you've covered most years whenever you cover economics. Needs are food, clothing, shelter, things that are necessary for survival. Wants are desires that can be satisfied by consuming a good or a service. Now, we're going to change things up a little bit here. Whenever we look at this, you can get rid of the term needs. Most economists don't believe there's such a thing as a needs. They call it life's most basic wants. That everything is a want. Food, clothing, shelter is life's most basic wants, but still there's a level of want to it. That there's no actual such thing as needs. And this is going to be important. There will be a comprehension check question based on that. So you want to look and see what is life's most basic wants. That's food, clothing, and shelter. That's different than just general wants, or the desires that can be satisfied by consuming a good or a service. So having a cell phone, as much of as it seems like a need or life's most basic want, it is a want. You don't have to have a cell phone. Food is a basic want. You do have to have that to survive. Then looking at goods and services, and this is something that you've covered multiple years as well, going back into elementary school. A doctor is going to be a service. A good could be any of these sports items. A service could be some type of housekeeping or wait staff, but they would be providing a good. So there's lots of different types of goods and services. This is generally, we know services are doing something for you. Good is something that's tangible that you get to keep. Now, this should be something that you understand, but we're going to get in a little bit more depth, is factors of production. So the definition of factors of production is the resources people have for producing goods and services to satisfy their wants and needs. Now, we're going to break this down into 4 factors of production. 3 are the basic ones. 4 is how you combine. The 4th is how you combine all of them. So labor is any time, energy, knowledge, or skills to produce something. So being able to produce this phone, there's going to be some time that goes into producing it. Specific energy, there's a knowledge, and the skill set to be able to produce this. All of that goes into labor. Land is any of the natural resources that goes into producing something. So it could be soil. It could be minerals. It could be the actual land that a building takes up. It could be whatever component that makes up an item is the land going into it. So if we're looking at food, or like, I don't know, this pen I have in my hand, the plastic comes from certain resources. The electronic pieces inside it have certain resources. There's lots of things that go into it. This isn't just poof out of thin air. There's stuff that builds into this, and that's the land that goes into it. Capital is anything produced in an economy that is used to produce other goods and services. So tools, machines, buildings, all of that stuff, anything that you could sell um, and make money on it if you had to eliminate like a factory is considered capital. So any of the machines inside it, the buildings, the tools, anything like that that has a dollar value on it that you could sell in some type of that's used to produce something is considered capital. And then entrepreneurship is the ability to take all three of them, land, labor, capital, combine them in a process with your vision, your skill, and ingenuity, and make something that people want to purchase. So entrepreneurship is this the ability to take a risk and to create a business. All of these come together to produce different items that we use in our economy and all over the world in the global economy. So let's look at how the factors of production go into Walt Disney World or Walt Disney Company and resorts parks. So land, any of the items, the physical piece of land where the park is built, the wood, the metal ores, the water, anything that goes into producing one of the Walt Disney World parks. If we're looking at labor, all of the people working there, so the salespeople, the waiters, the hotel staff, the characters in costume, entertainers, the janitors. If we're looking at capitals, so any of the castles, the roller coaster, machinery that they have, such as the monorail, anything that goes in down to a broom could be considered capital. And then the entrepreneurship would be considered Walt Disney to get it started. The former president and CEO, he just resigned like a few weeks ago, honestly, is Robert Iger. There's now a new CEO who I can't tell you off the top of my head, but that would be the entrepreneurship that's keeping all of this stuff producing to where it's an effective business. Then looking at production to consumption. So when we produce something, you're combining the factors of production in a process. This is why they're called the factors of production. So if we're looking at farming, for example, a farmer produces food by combining soil, water, and sunlight, the land, with seeds and machinery, or the capital. And then they use their knowledge, skills, time, and energy, and their workers as the labor. So producing an item is what combines the factors of production. The next step would be distribution, which is the process about how a good or service is made available to the people who want it. So if we're looking at milk, that's delivered to grocery stores. There's usually a milk company that does that, unless they have their own milk company. But there is a process for how that is getting to the store. The last act is consumption, or how is the consumer getting the product or service, or the act of buying, using goods and services. So there are never enough resources to produce all of the goods and services that people want. People in all societies have to make choices about which of their wants will be satisfied and which will not. We're going to call these economic choices. And this is really what defines your system of economy. If we were answering these questions that I'm about to ask you in a different country, we would have different answers for them. They're not all the same. When we look at benefits, costs, all of those, one of the things we start to talk about is the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is the highest valued benefit given up when a choice is made. So this is going to be the biggest cost to any decision that you make. So it's the next best alternative. So if we're thinking about in a few years, if you decide to go to college, there is an opportunity cost for you to go to college. That you are giving something up. In fact, you can put a dollar amount on it. you're giving up being able to work a job directly out of high school. Now, granted, the incentive of going to college is you would make more money long term, or you should. And I'm using college as a very flexible term. You could go to a trade school and make more than even I make right now, straight out of your trade school. But whatever that next best option that you're giving up to make a decision is your opportunity cost. Scarcity, everything in society is limited. Resources are always limited compared with the number and variety of wants people have. So there's this relationship between unlimited wants, like we said at the beginning, and our limited resources. And how we handle that really determines our economic system. We do that by answering 3 specific economic questions. I'm going to move my camera over here, my picture, so where you can see. So which goods and services should be produced and in what amounts, or what to produce? So what's going to be produced in the economy that we have, how these goods and services should be produced, or how to produce them. So we started with what we're going to produce. Now we're down to how are we going to make it happen, how to produce it. And then the last one is who we're going to get the goods and services, or for whom to produce. Another way is how are they going to be divided? All of those are the same question. So who is going to consume it? Who's going to get them? How are we going to give it to people? So when we're looking at how a society answers those 3 basic economic questions, it really comes down to their goals and values. A society that wants to achieve equality might develop a system for sharing its products equally. Now remember, that sounds good if we're sharing products equally, but if the government is deciding whom is getting certain products, you're losing the freedom there that you can usually take for yourself. But on the flip side, a society that wants to have freedom, wants to achieve freedom, might let citizens compete freely to try to get to goods and services. But if we're competing, that means that goods and services won't be distributed evenly. So that means some people will get more of a specific resource. Other people will not. So it means there's going to be some people suffering while other people are thriving. If your society views freedom, that's what you view. However, you're not getting to make decisions for yourself in a society that's distributed equally. So there's a balance that you're having to play between the 2 different types of societies. So really, how you answer those questions can be justified or determined by each of these economic systems. So we have traditional economy, command economies, market economies, and mixed economies. And mixed is exactly what it sounds like. It's all of these combined into this type of economy right here. So when we look at a traditional economy, we're looking at the basic economic decisions being made by long established patterns that they have. So they've always done it this way, and they're always going to do it this way. All members of a specific society come together and they support each other rather than just their families. And these are usually smaller groups. If we look at like the Amish, or if we look at tribes in Africa or Native American tribes, everyone comes together and works for the common good. They share, they trade, working in more of a old-fashioned style manner. And this is a traditional because they've always done it that way, just like the name sounds. When we look at a command economy or a planned economy, the government or some central authority, almost always the government, owns or controls the factors of production and makes the basic economic decisions. So the government comes in and takes over industries, and they're the ones making the decisions for all the people. Now, this image is on there. I will, full disclosure, didn't make this PowerPoint. But usually what happens is you're allowed so much of an item. You work for the government makes decisions, and so forth. A market economy, otherwise known as capitalism, is where private individuals own the factors of production and are free to make their own choices about production, distribution, and consumption. Another name for this is free enterprise, or people make the decisions for themselves. And then a mixed economy, like I was saying, is all elements, elements from all three of them. And this is the most common economic system. This is truly the economic system of the United States. However, it's going to be classified more of a market economy than it is a mixed economy. But this is the typical economic system for most countries throughout the world. So, some examples of these different types of economies. Traditional would be the Aborigines in Australia, the Amazonian tribes, like I said, the Amish. If we're looking at command, we're looking at China, Cuba, the former Soviet Union, North Korea. So those communist dictatorships tend to have more command style economies. A market is USA, Japan, but those are there because they're probably the closest thing we have. There's no such thing as a pure market economy because the government is involved in most countries' economies. And then if we're looking at mixed economies, Iceland, Sweden, France, USA, Japan, all of these countries form mixed economies, and more than that. This is just another chart that kind of breaks it down, the different styles of economy. So that's all I have for this section. Feel free to pause and go through as you're taking the quiz. And I will leave it open to where you can take it multiple times. If you have any questions, send me an email or comment on this post in Google Classroom. I hope you're all doing well. And we're almost done. So stay focused and we'll get through this together.